There's really a sort of a low-grade war. The only war going on today is not simply whether or not the left are purists and racists, or whether or not Kamala Harris should be already just named the president. There is actually an ongoing battle with the Trump administration, basically against our government. And, you know, we've seen this, but we saw the outlines of this when Trump was elected. You know, where you had like EPA scientists who put all the data on outside servers because they were afraid it was going to get wiped out. Well, they were right. And Bannon going to CPAC and saying that this project is all about deconstructing the administrative state. And we see the appointment of either complete morons or experts at fighting these agencies appointed to the head of these agencies. So there's a draft report every 4 years. It is congressionally mandated that government scientists put out an updated report. I guess it's every 3 years. The National Climate Assessment. And it is to assess what the situation is with climate, particularly as it's impacting this country. According to the New York Times, the average temperature in the United States has risen rapidly and drastically since 1980. Recent decades have been the warmest in the past 1,500 years. You don't know that. You weren't alive at that time. According to a sweeping federal climate change report awaiting approval, you ready for this? By the Trump administration. Right. The draft report by scientists is from 13 federal agencies. It has not been made public. So what we're seeing here are scientists obviously getting paid a huge amount of money on the side, making money off the hoax, even though they're working for the government now. So, you know, you got Al Gore's just writing them checks right now. Evidence for a changing climate abounds from the top of the atmosphere to the depths of the ocean, a draft of the report states. The authors note that thousands of studies conducted by tens of thousands of scientists have documented climate change on land and the air. Many lines of evidence demonstrate that human activities, especially emissions of greenhouse heat-trapping gases, are primarily responsible for recent observed climate change. The National Academy of Sciences has signed off on the draft report. The authors are awaiting permission from the Trump administration to release it. We're just going to play this music for infinity.
I like that music.
Another scientist involved in the process who spoke to the New York Times on the condition of anonymity said he and others were concerned that it would be suppressed.
Hey, what happened?
I would be willing to bet a significant amount of money that this would be suppressed. The report concludes that even if humans immediately stopped emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, the world would still feel at least an additional 0.5 degree Fahrenheit of warming over the century compared with today. The projected actual rise, scientists say, will be as much as 2 degrees Celsius. 2 degrees Celsius is like 5 degrees Fahrenheit, right? I can't do that math.
I don't know, but
it's not good.
It's worse than not good. That's absolute catastrophe.
Right. Among the more significant of the study's findings is that it's possible to attribute some extreme weather to climate change. The EPA is one of 13 agencies that must approve of the report by August 18. So there are scientists who come from 13 different agencies across our government Each department must approve of it. The EPA is one of those agencies. You'll recall Scott Pruitt, the head of that agency, does not believe that carbon dioxide is a primary contributor to global warming. He thinks that it's God juice. The report says significant advances have been made linking human influence to individual extreme weather events since the last national climate assessment was produced in 2014. So in other words, just in the past 3 or 4 years, it's become even clearer. And I think we mentioned this last week. There were reports out that global warming had begun earlier than previously believed. And so the progression was actually, I guess, faster or more building steam in some ways. Maybe steam is not the right word. The draft concludes that there was a medium likelihood that the climate change played a role in the Texas heat wave. They were more convinced that there was relatively strong evidence that showed the heat wave in Europe of 2003. I don't know if folks remember that, but a lot of people died. And in Australia in 2013 were more clearly linked to global warming. The draft report finds it extremely likely that half the global mean temperature increase since 1951 can be linked to human influence. It studied the entire country and says that global climate change impacted every part of the United States. Increases of 5 to 7.5 degrees, like I said, of Fahrenheit by the late century, changes in this country. Now, for those of you who feel and are afraid that the Trump administration will suppress this report, I have not good news for you. The staff at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, this was a piece in The Guardian. The USDA have been told to avoid using the term climate change in their work. I don't know if that's one of the agencies that has to sign off on it. I imagine it is. And I also imagine if they won't use the words climate change in their work, they may be a little hesitant to sign off on a report about climate change. The officials were instructed to reference weather extremes. One email from a Bianca Moibus-Clune, the director of soil health, lists terms that should be avoided by staff and those that should replace them. Climate change is in the avoid category, to be replaced by weather extremes. And instead of words like climate change adaptation, or staff are asked to use resilience to weather extremes. The primary cause of human-driven climate change is also targeted. The term reduce greenhouse gases is in the avoid list. Build soil organic matter, increase nutrient use efficiency is in the use category. Meanwhile, sequester carbon, in any type of
not in the use category.
Well, because you can't
carbon. That would mean that you're indicating carbon's some sort of a problem.
Well, and what you're supposed to use is build soil organic matter.
Yeah.
Which is actually the same thing they tell you to do with little kids. You don't say don't lie to me.
Build soil organic matter.
You don't say don't lie to me. You say tell me the truth. So that's all they're trying to do is be more positive.
Just tell me the truth.
Mobius-Clune wrote that references to economic growth and emerging business opportunities of the rural U.S. agro-tourism and improved aesthetics should be tolerated and appreciated instead of using those climate terms that are contentious. Apparently, in a different email, Jimmy Bramblett, the deputy chief for programs at the NRCS, said it's become clear one of the previous administration's priorities is not consistent with that of the incoming administration. Namely, that priority is climate change. Please visit with your staff and make them aware of this shift in perspective. There was a staffer, a guy named Tim Hafner, who wrote to Blamlet, "I would like to know correct terms I should use instead of climate change and anything to do with carbon. I want to ensure to incorporate correct terminology that the agency has approved to use." Some other staffers were not enamored with this. On an email on July 5th, an employee stated, "We would prefer to keep the language as is, stressing the need to maintain the scientific integrity of the work." Obviously, one of those classic hoaxsters, probably one of the yes men, embedded in the agency. Then they're going to release these emails in a fun-filled box set where they'll make more money on this climate change hoax. So good for those entrepreneurs posing as scientists and people who care about the climate. They're going to make some big bucks. Big bucks. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos